I'm going to start and take a few steps back. It's a beautiful morning in Chelsea, Quebec. On the roof, just to start, I'm trying to get the sun behind me. I have 750 watts of solar. Window in, and that window as well from kind of day one. The spotlights, I've got 8 of them. 2 forward, 2 back, 2 for each side. Those were so far the most challenging for me. A 12 volt DC 3-way switch like you'd have on the stairs in your house, so you can turn the lights on front and the back, or up and down. So this is the same thing. I can turn these lights on from the back, or if you see in the dash up there, they're actually mounted from the front. So I'll do kind of a walk through from back to front. I'm kicking sandals off and putting them back on. So from the back, the solar is on, and welcome to will be the garage space. In that the bed is going to be over top of here. There's iron bars going side to side, and then plywood on top of that, and bed on top of that. So the bottom of the bed will be roughly around window height. So do a little walkthrough of the electrical here. So that there is the solar controller, and that is charging our lithium battery. So on the input side, we have the solar controller. The dark blue cables coming from the back go to under the driver's seat is the car battery for the vehicle, and a DC to DC Renology charge controller. So those wires, I'm waiting for the bulkhead to go in so that I can bring them across. Those will come to the negative and positive buses, doink doink, which in turn go to the battery by way of a cutoff. So that's the supply side, with cutoffs for the solar from source, and then between the solar and the bus, so I can isolate the solar. This here is our inverter, and we're actually running tools off of it. So the solar is charged the battery, and I was using the angle grinder yesterday, the drills, etc., etc. We're using our electrical here, don't have to use extension cords. This guy here is a Shore battery charger, so if I want to plug in somewhere, I can, and in the short term for that, I'm just going to run a cord out the back, because I don't see us doing it that often. One thing that's missing, in that I don't have it, is on the negative side of the battery, there's basically a sensor that tells how much load is going out. So it works off the ground side. So most of the circuits in here, I'm not just grounding to the vehicle, I'm actually running negative and positive all the way back to the fuse box. And this is our fuse box. And the circuits on there so far, I've got the internal lights, the fans, the stove and the fridge wiring is roughed in, I'll say. So that's kind of the electrical situation. And the fans are connected, and one set of interior lights are connected. And those, in addition to being just on off, they're also touch switches. So in the bedroom, if somebody's sitting out reading or whatever, has the internal lights on, you can still turn the light off in the bedroom. Doink, doink. So the water tanks, this is the shower. And just the anatomy of the van. From the bed, on the driver's side will be sink, then refrigerator, and then our stove oven combination, and then the door. On the driver's side is the shower, and then there will be a bench under which, I'm leaning over the bar here, that's where the hot water heater, propane hot water heater is going. So the hoses are roughed in. That blue and pink line are the hot and cold water, and then the power for the lighter, propane lighter. And the yellow line there is for an AC outlet on this side. The blue is the car charger going to the battery. Now in the shower, it's super low profile because we're not running anything outside of the vehicle. Everything's running inside in the way of water, so that we don't have to worry about freeze-ups. So coming up from under there will be the drain. and that will go into it's kind of a plastic box with a sump pump in it, and it's purpose built for that. It does like traps hair or whatever else, and then from there it'll be pumped to what I call our water plant, which is basically a filtration system, and that will pump to either the gray water tank, which is sitting up on end, but that's where it's going to be sitting, or the recirculation tank. So whatever water comes out of the bottom of the shower, if we're like shampooing our hair or whatever, that'll go to gray water. But if we just want to stand in the shower, which I do like to do, that'll go back to the recirculating tank. It gets cleaned and filtered and sterilized, UV sterilization, carbon filtration, and I think it's 5 or 10 micron filtration, back into this tank. And so my water pump, I can source water, and it'll be a pressurized system, so you turn on the tap and water runs. It'll either come from the main water tank, which we use for cooking, or the recirculation tank for there. So we have options, right? What else? The sensors. So every time I buy something, I end up cutting holes. Buy a van, cut a hole in the wall. Buy a van, cut a hole in the roof. Buy a van, right? Buy water tanks, drill holes in them to put sensors in, and then figure out how to make the sensors work with the control unit that I have. So I have what's called a Pico, and it's like an all-vehicle monitoring system. So the Pico will be connected to my missing sensor here, as well as the solar controller, as well as the inverter. All have inputs to the Pico, which will sit next to the door here on a cabinet, as well as the levels of the water tanks, and I can't think of what they call it, but basically something that tells whether or not the van's level front to back, side to side. So I only have one input per tank. So in line here that's going to be the common, and that's the lead off, and depending, this will be on its side. So as the water fills, I make a contact, and ultimately the resistance, that's a very small component called a resistor, and another resistor. So as the water fills, the resistance off of this lead will change, and that's programmable on the Pico, so that I can define 1/3 full, 2/3 full, and full. This is the filler. So as it sits, and you can see on this side, this is for filling. That's a vent which will go down and out. So as you fill, if it gets too full, you're spilling. I'm not going to burst the tank. Off the bottom is a takeoff for actual water supply that'll run to my pumps. The other one is a drain valve, so that if I want to drain the tanks out, I bought electronically controlled, like 12-volt controlled water valves. So from one place, which is probably going to be in the back, I can flip a switch and drain my tanks. Each of the tanks will have its own servo, so that I don't have to be crawling underneath anything or worrying about frozen valves or anything like that, because everything's going to be inside. What else? So it's all insulated. This is a thermal break, but underneath that is the thin-slit insulation, and or where we ran out of thin-slit, there's a few places that, I'm using rock wool instead of thin-slit. The thin-slit's the white puffy stuff, same as what you'd have in a jacket, and the rock wool is just filling in those. So I still have to cut one more hole in the side for our water heater, which is propane powered. The stove and the water heater are running off propane, and there's a 50-gallon tank that's being mounted right underneath where that is outside. Over the weekend, I installed the swivels, which was a major kind of thing. The driver's side was a major pain in the ass. I'm just going to walk around because the emergency brake's too high. So you have to actually lower the emergency brake, and you can see the top part of the cover is missing. And I don't know what I'll end up keeping for that, because it's fine right now. Marika and I were talking about I'd make some like a leather coat for it, just to keep stuff from going in, but it does now clear, which is just dandy. And on the side here, you can't really see, and the emergency brake doesn't work when the seat's swiveled. This is a 40 amp circuit breaker. To cut power from the vehicle to the charge controller down here, so that I can turn off. I don't have to charge the batteries from the vehicle. And if we're away any point in time, it also acts as an isolator, so I don't have to worry about the van killing the car battery. But I do want to be able to isolate that, and not being able to get into it without being able to pull the seat off. I wanted to run the that breaker on the outside, and that was a nice, safe place to kind of hide it. There's going to be another one from the unit to the vehicle, but I'm going to put that in the back where it's convenient for where all the other stuff is. So each of the tanks has that sensor. Up here is one of the outlets on the 110 volt way, and this will be mounted as well. And now I've got 110 volts. I can turn it on and off. We're not running anything off 110. Our fridge is 12 volt, so it is just for accessories, media server, stuff like that. Above is going to be storage, like cabinets, overhead bins, all the way along. A little bit higher here, and maybe just a shelf, because it's going to be over the stove, is right here, so we have to be careful for what's above. And in this model year, we kind of got, well, we were expecting a shelf above the driver and passenger seat, and they decided not to include it this year. So I had to take the headliner down anyway. We've got insulation I have to put back in, but I had to take it down to run wiring in that. When it goes back up, there's also a piece of foam here to hide the airbag. But when I put it back up, I'm going to tap into these connections, these bolt-ons, and that's for the sunshades, and put a shelf in here. And because we wanted somewhere to like store laptops and maybe I don't know, like storage. You can't have too much storage. So yeah. So overall, we're really happy with the vehicle. Actually, it's awesome to drive. They accidentally gave us some sort of super advanced cruise control, which I am absolutely loving. Like, it brakes for you. It manages, like, if people pull in front of you. It's a really lazy kind of cruise control thing. But right now, and there's the chippies. Right now, Marika's working on the shower. She's the carpenter. I'll just give her the credits. This here is usually just flush. Most van builds I've seen don't try to leverage. There's this kind of pocket space here. They usually stuff it full of insulation and then start the walls from there. We built boxes and made this narrow because, for one thing, we're going to have a lot of canvases, but there's just lots of things that can be stored in just a few inches. So having kind of canvas storage, or this, and just the extra storage, made sense. There's going to be a shelf above, like a bookshelf above the back door, and I still have to insulate the back doors. But everything's coming along. So my next part of this is actually kind of TBD. Marika's doing all the carpentry. I don't know if we're ready to bring in the fridge, which is wired. And so that's for the fridge, and this is for the piezoelectric for the stove, and it's got thermal wires, so no overheating, just like you'd have in your own stove. Yeah, so I'm a little out of stuff to do until the wood is a little further along, but that is kind of where the van is. Still have to insulate the doors. Having said all that, like, we've got the shower comes with a liner that we're going to cut to size, and again, we conformed it to the back wall, so lots of kind of interesting cuts there, and keeping it low to the ground. It's going to have a light in there, so I got to put a light switch on. That's part of the wiring up there is for that, and under cabinet lighting. And the door is we haven't ordered it yet, but it's kind of it rolls up to one side and slides across, so it's opaque. In there is also our bathroom, so when it's not being used as a shower, that's where the porta potty sits, and just provide some privacy, right? And that's kind of where we are. If push came to shove and we got an offer and closed and had to be out of the house by end of October, if we put our shoulders to it, we would be we could be done ugly in a week or pretty in 3. So we're getting close. It's the big decisions, and much of the much of the finagly stuff. This wire being first and foremost. This is a huge, huge wire. It came with the vehicle, of course. Why the hell they didn't run it through the panel and instead had these clips and had it out when up builders or upgraders are going to need it the hell out of the way anyway. I took all the insulation off just so I could spread them out flat so we could have them running behind. And but it wasn't long enough to kind of stuff it in behind, so that's all going to be behind like overhead bins anyway, as is the joints. So some of the joints were, this I just put up. Marika's in the middle of cutting this piece, so it's just kind of hanging in there just with its own weight. I found it on the floor, but I was just sweeping up this morning. Yeah, so there's, everything's kind of in situ. We haven't figured or decided on what we're going to do with final treatment for the wood, whether paint or cover somehow. But yeah, so that is where the van build is at. And yeah, feel free to ask any questions, post any comments. Happy to answer. And cheers.